The Liberals just turfed the apolitical National Energy Board in favor of some politically charged regulator rooted in social justice. And the worst part is, the new regulations seem to imply that oil and gas workers are sex offenders. Do they know we're talking about the oil patch and not Ottawa? The Liberal government has just announced new assessment criteria for energy projects in a new bill being introduced in the House of Commons. After accusing the prior government, the Conservatives, of gutting the environmental assessment process for political reasons, Environment Minister Catherine McKenna announced her new criteria. You're not going to believe this. All projects will be assessed not just for environmental impacts, but also for impacts on health, the economy, social issues, gender, and Indigenous rights. McKenna also said projects will be assessed on the basis of robust science, evidence, and traditional Indigenous knowledge. How does one assess the gender impact of an energy project? Well, CTV's Don Martin was wondering the exact same thing when Catherine McKenna went on his show to explain the new regulatory criteria. Just watch this.
Gender impact, how does that fit into a pipeline approval process?
So I'm really glad you asked that, because I think people are like, well, what is this gender thing? Well, imagine that you have a huge number of people going to a remote community, many men. What is the impact on the community? What is the impact on women in the community? And actually, once again, smart proponents understand this. So they're going to put measures in place. That's all it is. It's just taking a smart approach to thinking about, okay, what's going to be the impact of a major development in a particular area?
Okay, that's interesting. All right.
McKenna basically implied that the thousands of men who work in the oil patch could be fiends just waiting to descend on a community and pillage the women there. Honestly, what else could the implication be? It's so stupid, it's pretty hard to believe. And she was able to say that without any pushback from Don Martin. All he said was, "That's interesting," and moved on to the next question. Men coming into a community and working there. What's next? Marriage? Children? White picket fences? With a minivan in the driveway? The government has to save us from this. Someone should really explain to Catherine McKenna that we're talking about places like Christina Lake and Fort McMurray and Bonnyville, not Hollywood or Liberal offices in Ottawa, where it would seem men routinely do prey on women there. It's interesting that McKenna and indeed the federal government singled out these men, our fathers, husbands, and sons, who are just trying to earn a living for their families, while never uttering a word about the men from actual rape cultures who are illegally streaming across the border into Canada. Those guys, they're just misunderstood. I suppose this new regulation is a real window into the mind of a Liberal, just so disconnected with what it means to do real work. Environment Minister Catherine McKenna says that they will assess projects based on robust science and evidence. Well, then good news. I've got some robust science and evidence for her. Alberta has many, many remote work camps with thousands of men working far from home and far from their families, and yet no Alberta cities appear in the top 10 cities for instances of sexual assault in Canada. On the other hand, our neighbors to the west, British Columbia, has 4 cities in the top 8 with regard to instances of sexual assault. So maybe, just maybe, when considering evidence-based policy, the Liberals should consider regulating the gender equity policies of those who oppose pipelines versus those who work on them. And let's be real here, while oil companies in Canada routinely have sexual harassment seminars, often once a year, that employees have to sit through, and they're designed to keep their employees safe, these companies don't consider gender rights when considering investment in a company. Oil companies are packing up from Canada and heading for greener pastures in the Middle East, where women are little more than chattel, but the business climate is just safer and more inviting for them, which means by adding all these extra layers of regulations, including one that affects gender rights to the energy approval process, Catherine McKenna is actually helping countries who oppress women. Good job. Now, even though I'm annoyed at McKenna's bizarre implication about the oil patch and the men who work tirelessly there, it's really just one part of a broader policy that's already achieving what it was designed to do. Just hours after McKenna decreed these onerous and ridiculous new regulations, Suncor announced that it has pretty well had it with Canada after decades of investing and doing business here in Alberta, citing Canada's difficult regulatory environment as their reason why. When the new requirements for pipeline and energy approvals are so vague and weird and expensive, the answer to the question of approvals can always be no if the Liberals want that answer to be no. And given how quickly Suncor reacted to this, it has got to be the most efficient Liberal policy in decades. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. If you're like me and you live on your phone, well, I've got great news for you. We just launched our new Rebel Media app. You can download it on the Google Play Store or the Apple iStore and take the other side of the story with you wherever you go.